Hi, Paul here. So I've been asked to record a video just to share some of my sourcing strategies and how I sort of manage leads. So I'm going to share my screen and just show you what I do. So firstly, I use the website Endol rather than CreditSafe, so pretty similar to CreditSafe. You can sort of credit check people and stuff like that. I guess it's horses for courses and whatever you're used to. I've always used Endol and it sort of works for me. So basically what you want to do is you want to sign up for an account with them. You can have a paid version or you can sign up for free. The issue with the free version is that your search results are limited to about 50 companies at a time. So you might want to consider the paid version. But anyway, for purposes of explanation, the first thing I want to do is sign up for the Explorer product. So you basically just create an account, username, password, and then Explorer, which basically gives you this you can basically search stuff by filters. So the key things that I'll put in first of all is status. So this includes all companies. So we want only active companies. So we don't want anything that's in liquidation or being closed down. We then look for so that's really the key data. Now, I'm sector agnostic, so I know that Jeremy talks a lot about not searching for companies by SIC code, but when you're sector agnostic, like me, it doesn't really matter. So I would use this to search by SIC code to find LBO transactions to start with. I wouldn't use this method for finding distressed companies, and I'll come on to how I would look for distressed. But my typical criteria for an LBO deal will be I want a company that's at least 10 years old, so it's very well established. So let's put the date in, 1950 to 2008, and then apply filter. Oops, it's put the wrong date in there, so let me just put that in. Bear with me. So yeah, we go back to 2008. So we've got basically companies that are at least 10 years old. There we go. Apply filter. So currently in the UK, there's 1.1 million companies that are at least 10 years old. We've already put the status in as active. You can filter down by type, but we're not going to use that. Location. So depending on where you want to do, you can search by region. So I could go for Northwest. So that's region Northwest. I could go for a county, Cheshire, for example. I could go for just a town, Chester, for example, or I could do by postcode area. Now, I always do it by postcode area. So for me, local to home is the CH postcode area. Also, Stockport is not far away. Warrington is not far away. So if you're not paying for the version, you might want to just use one postcode area at a time. So put all your criteria in, do the CH postcode area, and then come back to apply the search again and go for the next postcode area. And then usually for LBO deals, you won't get more than 50 in each postcode area. So that's how you do location. Industry, so SIC code. So let's say I want manufacturing businesses, for example. You can actually put in the postcode area. So I know that 78 is the one for recruitment. So you can actually type by number, or you can search by sector. As I said, word of caution, don't use this type of searching for if you're specific on sectors, or if you're not sector agnostic like me. This video to start with is showing you how to identify LBO type transactions. So what I would probably tend to find is that I'm not bothered about sector. So if I miss some particular companies, I'm not bothered because there's that much opportunity out there. For everyone I miss, there's always a deal out there. So anyway, we've got manufacturing as our SIC. Financials. So I will be looking here at firstly current assets. So not always the case, but as a rule of thumb, if you usually current assets in most SMEs are pretty much debtor book. So it's not, so current assets can be cash, can be debtor book. In most small and medium enterprises that don't have a lot of cash, it typically tends to be just the debtor book. So usually most businesses typically, as a rule of thumb, maybe get paid in 60 days. So if I put in there 1 million as a current asset, then that's going to find me businesses with a turnover of about 6 million, because 1 million times by the 60 days it equates to about 6 million. And then if I wanted to go up to, say, 10 million turnover, then I would put in here 1500. No, that's wrong. If I put in here 2.5 million, then that will give me up to about 15 million, because 6 times 2.5 is 15 million. So that's going to get me turnover between 6 and 15 million, which is a sort of sweet spot really for LBO deals. A different way to do it, so you can actually, so if I just take that filter out, you can actually search by turnover. So if I just wanted companies with a turnover of 5 million up to 15 million, I could just put in the turnover. But just a word of caution on this. The problem of searching by turnover is, I think in the UK, if you've got a turnover of under 6 point something million, you don't have to file full accounts. And if you don't file full accounts, you don't pick up the turnover figures. Just for purposes of explanation, if you want bigger ones, so sort of 10 to 15 million, you can search by turnover. Or if you want to find sort of smaller ones, then I'd probably search by the current assets. So just to explain those two things. I would probably want to look for businesses that have got some decent fixed assets. So because obviously we're looking to leverage, we could leverage the current assets, but we could also leverage the fixed assets. So if I put in 1 to 5 million, these companies that we're looking at now have got fixed assets between 1 and 5 million. And then net assets is quite an important one, because we only want companies that are solvent. So if we put a minimum net asset value of, say, 1 million up to 10 million, you can see there now that we've got 56 companies that have come up in those postcode areas. So if we just drop that down, take out postcode areas. So we've got active companies incorporated at least 10 years ago in the CH and WA postcode areas in the manufacturing sector, with turnover between 5 and 15 million, fixed assets of 1 to 5, net assets 1 to 10. And then if we click apply filters, this will then give us a list of all the companies that come up that meet that criteria. And then there isn't really an easy way to do this. What I would probably do is open each one in a new tab, and basically I'll work through each one and have a look to see whether or not it looks interesting. So the key things that I'm looking for here is, just bear with me. So first of all, first company, Packaging Automation Limited. So you can see here it's a company that's been around for 55 years. So it's got 1 shareholder. That's probably one of the first things I'll look at. I probably like to keep this under 4 shareholders, because if you've got 10, 15, 20 shareholders, you've potentially got 15 to 20 people that you've got to all bring to the table to get the deal done. So when I'm scrolling through this, I'll probably discount anybody that's got more than 5 shareholders. What I'm then looking at is the date of birth of the directors. So you can see here 1946, 1951. So those directors are going to be older than 60, which is another key thing that I will look at, because potentially they could be looking for an exit strategy, and they could be approaching retirement, for example. What I'll so that's the first thing. I'll then have a quick look at the financials on here. So actually not on there. So yeah, sorry, you scroll down to the bottom, and if you've got the paid for version, when you click the financials section, you'll get all the relevant data, but you can get a snapshot view by scrolling down to the bottom here. So we can see here 2.4 million net assets, turnover of just shy of 10 million, total assets of 6.85, cash in the bank 1 million, so that's quite a nice thing to have. It's got 115 employees, it's got some liabilities, so its debt ratio is about 65%. So for me, I will cancel this one out as an opportunity, because it's already got quite a lot of leverage within it. I'm really looking for a debt ratio under about 35%. So I would discount that one on that basis. So that's one. Let's have a look at the next one. So next one, we've got one shareholder again. We've got directors born sort of 1950s, 1960s. So yes, that one potentially could work. And then if we look at the financials, again, debt ratio is a bit high, 50%. So probably would discount that one again. Next one. So we've got financials, debt ratio 15%, so this potentially could be a good one. So turnover of 11 million, net assets of 7, total assets of 8.2, cash in the bank 2, not much of a liabilities in comparison to the rest of the balance sheet, 54 employees, really low debt ratio, so potentially this could be a goer. And then looking at the directors' date of birth, so we can see there 1960s, 1940s, 1950s, 1927, so yeah, okay, he's resigned. So yeah, you know, again, they could potentially be looking at an exit strategy. And again, we've got one shareholder. So Fishback UK Limited, what I would then do with a target company is I will then Google it, have a look to see what they do. Global leader in sealant and adhesive cartridges. So I'd probably go on the website, have a look to see what they're all about. I'd probably have a closer look at them on Companies House. So we just go to Companies House, put in the name of the company. Here we are. Oops. So I'll probably have a look at their confirmation statement to see. So no updates, no updates. I want to go back to one where there was updates. So this one here, 2016. This will hopefully tell me who owns the business. So person of significant control is that individual there. So potentially he could be the shareholder, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he is. So let's have a look at the annual return. So this is going back a few years, and we've got at the bottom. So it's owned by a parent company, Fishback KG. So I probably rule this one out on the basis that it's probably owned by some bigger corporate entity. So I'll probably look that company up to double check that first of all. But it looks like this is a UK subsidiary of a much larger firm. But let's just assume for purposes of explanation that it was owned by that guy. Then what I'd be looking to do is probably then just have a quick look at their full accounts. So just scroll down to their balance sheet. And so what we've got here, turnover of 11, so this is profit and loss, 11 million, operating profit 1.5. So, you know, it's a decent profitable business. It's got double-digit return. And then on the balance sheet, so we've got fixed assets of 2.8 million. They've got stock of 539k, debtors of 2.8, cash in the bank of 2. Not a great deal of creditors in comparison to the rest of the balance sheet. And we can see that they've got retained earnings there of 6.7. So if I was looking at this as an LBO transaction, I guess the key things here is stock. You could probably finance about 50% of that. So you could raise maybe about 250k. Debtors, you can probably factor 80, in some cases 90% of that. So you could look at sort of 2.4, 2.5 million that you could raise off the debtor book. And of course, you can use the cash in the bank as a way to buy the business. But just a word of caution, if you do use the cash in the bank, then potentially there is a corporation tax event, so you could be clobbered with a big bill. So there is potentially a workaround on that, which is quite complicated, but just bear that in mind when you're looking at cash in the bank as a way to buy a business. So in effect, you could raise, 2.5, 4.5, sort of 4.7, less obviously whatever working capital requirement there may be. So to work out the working capital, normally what I'm looking at is what liabilities are due within the next 12 months. So probably this bit here, creditors, plus maybe a month's worth of working capital in the bank. So if the business, what was it, turning over 11 million, making $1 million profit, so it's costing about 10 million a year to run, which is about 830 grand a month. So I probably want at least 830k in working capital plus whatever the immediate sort of liabilities are. So in effect, in this business, there's probably not really any of that cash that you can use because you've got creditors due within a year here, and you've obviously got 800 grand a month that's needed for working capital. You see here that you've got notes in the accounts. What I would be looking at here is when you scroll down through the accounts, you can look at notes 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, which will explain potentially what these are. So if we just actually do that, we'll come back to cash flow in a moment. Where are we? So yeah, these are the notes to the accounts. That's a good one. Employees. So if you use the LLP model, for example, on 54 employees, that could look quite significant. So here we are. So this is what the assets potentially are valued at in the account. So these aren't necessarily the real values. These will be depreciated values. So as a rule of thumb for asset finance, probably whatever the equipment is and stuff stated in the accounts, half it and then half it again, and that gives you a bit of an idea of what you might be able to raise. But buildings, potentially they could have been depreciated in value, but actually in real terms they could be worth more than actually stated in the accounts. So for example, I'm looking at an LBO deal at the moment where in the accounts the buildings are actually valued at 1.8, but in reality they're worth 4 million, and which obviously just gives a position of extra leverage. So anyway, fixed assets in the business, you've got freehold buildings valued at 1.8 million. So you could raise a commercial mortgage or a secured loan against that to raise cash to buy the business. Plant and equipment, depending on exactly what that is, machinery, etc., you can potentially raise about 50% of that. Probably can't get anything on the molds. So that's the assets. Stock, you've got raw materials and finished goods. You can usually raise stock finance against finished goods rather than sort of raw materials and work in progress. It's quite complicated. There are potential solutions, but as a quick sort of guide, just really look at finished goods. You can probably raise about 150k of that in stock finance. Debtors, so you can factor the trade debtors, but we're not going to look at prepayments or the other there. So trade debtors 2.4, we could raise about 80% of that, which is about 2 million. And then there's obviously a breakdown of the same for liabilities, so we can look at trade creditors, tax, etc., and that will give you an idea of what the working capital requirement is in addition to the sort of monthly expenditure, the operating expenses, etc. You can dive into more detail, obviously looking through the accounts, but the other thing that I will pay close attention to is the cash flow statement, because if you're leveraging to buy the business, you want a cash generative business, because if you've got to service the debt that you're going to be taking on in the business. So there needs to be enough future cash flows to enable the LBO transaction to proceed. So you can see here, net cash flow generated from operating activities 1.4, from investing activities costs 252, dividends paid. So obviously you'd have to question whether or not that's going to continue. If you became the owner of the business, are you going to carry on paying yourself a dividend of 700k, or are you going to leave more in the business? So obviously that has some flexibility, but we can see here that even after that dividend, that the net increase in cash in that year is 453k, and then it sits on cash and cash equivalents of 2 million. So that would be quite a positive LBO transaction. We're not looking at this one because it's potentially a subsidiary of a larger business. It's not to say that you couldn't look at maybe a corporate carve out or something like that, but it's clearly a good business for them, making them money. But as I say, if it was privately owned, then this potentially would look like a good LBO deal. So obviously there's quite a lot of research, for per company. That probably, I do this quite quickly, but that probably takes you realistically about 5 minutes to sort of properly review that. Once I've done that, I'll then either go back to Companies House and look for the owner's name. I'll probably use 192.com to see if I can identify their home address. Sometimes just by putting in their name and the town in which the company is sort of based, so Runcorn, can sometimes lead to stuff on the internet that possibly could identify their home address. But I wouldn't get really hung up on that. If I can find the home address, great, it's more effective, you get a better response rate, but I wouldn't spend hours and hours and hours Googling to try and find the home address. It's probably better to just send the letter, even if it's to the business address, than to not send it at all because you can't find the home address. So yeah, that's how I look for sort of LBO type transactions. If you wanted to do it for distressed companies, so if you go back to the search bit here, I would not use any of this unless I'm really sector agnostic. So let's say you're looking for recruitment businesses. I'd probably use something like Yell or the Thomson directory. Let's look for employment agencies, recruitment consultants in Liverpool. So look on Yell, you look at each one, you then, literally go on each website, Forest Recruitment Limited. You'd go on the website to basically find the name of the limited company. Obviously, in that case, we've got the name of the limited company. But if you look back at the some of the other recruitment businesses listed here, you don't always get. So, for example, PFU Recruitment, that might be just a trading name and might not necessarily be the limited company name. So I would probably go for more info, see if there's a link to the website, look them up, find the limited company name, and then I'll look them up on either Endol or just directly on Companies House. But yeah, Forest Recruitment. So you can either use Endol to look them up, or you can go for Companies House. So the reason I'm going on Companies House is because I want to see what the opportunity is. So Forest Recruitment Limited, filing history, full account. So it's obviously a fairly large business. And again, if we have a quick look at the balance sheet, you can see they've got an 11 million turnover, profit of 1.1. So obviously they're a pretty decent business. So if I was looking for distress, they immediately don't qualify. So a different way to do it would be to look them up on Endol itself and look at their credit rating. And if it's a poor credit rating, then you would possibly write to them. If it's not a poor credit rating, then obviously move on to the next one. Because I'm really sector agnostic, I will look at. So if I go back to companies in Chester postcode area and the Warrington postcode area, we've got status, so status active, we've already got that in there. Incorporation date, I would probably go for anything from before 2015, so 3 years ago. I think if you put into sort of the last 2 years, then you risk picking up sort of recently incorporated businesses that probably haven't got a massive turnover. I think if they've been around for more than 3 years, then they've got enough time to either get themselves into a mess or they've hopefully built the turnover to a certain level. So let's just put in 1950 again. Apply the filter. So 50,000 companies, right? Okay, so location, we've put that in. Industry, let's say I'm looking for employment agencies. So I know I'm searching by SIC code here, but I think that there's that much opportunity out there. Whilst you risk not picking up some opportunities from that, you are still picking up the majority. So financials, basically all I'm going to look at here is current assets. So if I want companies with a minimum sort of around about £1 million turnover, then let me put current assets in 200,000, because if, again, we said before, most businesses get paid in 60 days. So if you've got current assets and most of that is your debtor book, then 200,000 times 6 is 1.2 million. And let's say we want to go up to about 6 million. So sort of companies between 1 and 6 million. Then you'd put in here 1 million, because 1 times 6 is 6 million. So I'm not bothered about fixed assets or anything like that, but I only want insolvent companies. So if I put in here minus 100, minus 1 million, this is going to pull up all of the companies that are insolvent. So you can see actually there's no employment agencies that are insolvent with that sort of turnover in Cheshire or Warrington. So if I just go back to, let's say, looking at the Northwest as a region, for example, then there's 3 companies. So let's also have a look at the West Midlands. So there's 7 companies there. So again, you open each one in a new tab. And then you just have a really quick snapshot. So these are probably quicker because there's not the same sort of information to digest. So again, I'm looking at shareholders. So there's only 2, so that's doable. What I'm not really bothered about is the age of the directors, because if they're distressed, they could be, 18 years of age or 75 years of age. It makes no difference. If they're distressed, they're distressed. But when we have a look at the financials, we can see here that they're insolvent to the tune of 178k. They've obviously got some assets on the books, but they've got quite a lot of liability. So you can see there that their debt ratio is 158%, and it's marginally increased. And whilst you won't always get this figure, you can see here they've got a turnover of 2.36 million. So I would probably have a look at, I'd probably send a letter to this one. So again, you can scroll down and you've got the address of the business there. You can look them up on 192. You can look them up on Companies House. You can still do the same level of research that I did for the LBO. If you wanted to look them up on Companies House, but obviously that becomes quite time consuming. So for the fact that they're insolvent, let's just send them a letter. So that's how I would identify if I was completely sector agnostic. But if I'm looking for a specific sector, as I said, recruitment consultants in Liverpool, get the name of the company, and then look them up in the credit checking software to see whether they've got a good or a bad credit rating. If they've got a bad credit rating, send them a letter. So that's sourcing. Let me just quickly show you how I manage my leads now, and then we'll talk about how we post the letters in a really easy way that saves you having to lick and stick and put stamps on and whatever else. So let me just log into my account, and then I'll show you what we do on this. Password. Okay, so yeah, before I tell you about how I manage the leads, let me just tell you how we actually mail them in the first place. So you basically sign up for a free account on DocMail. You can use, of course, another mailing website, but I've sort of used a few, and this one seems to be the best. So basically, you get your A4 document, so investor letter, let's call it. We can decide first class, standard delivery. I think if you use their standard delivery, it takes about 3 days. So if you want letters to arrive with people on a weekend, then you probably want to be getting the letters out on a Wednesday. So you then upload your A4 document. So let me do that. Sourcing from the desk of Jeremy Harbour. So you can see I'm using the letter off the shared drive. So we upload the letter. Takes a little while. When the letter's added on, what you then do is you're going to add your addresses. So you basically put them in a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet or CSV file. And then basically what they will do is when they've got all the data, they'll merge it, they'll print it, they'll stick it in an envelope, they'll frank it, and they'll post it out to the person that you're sending it to, and you don't have to do any of that. So, right, okay, so I've used the merge one, so that's not going to work. But basically, for the purpose of explanation, you upload your document, you add your addresses, and you have to use certain fields, so you can download a template basically that you can import all your addresses to, and then when you've done all of that, you can click print and post. You have to pay for it up front, so credit card or debit card, and I think that the cost is I think it's about 55 or 56 pence. So that's for the paper, the envelope, and the stamp. I think the cost of a second-class stamp in the UK is about 60p. So it's actually cheaper than you going to buy the stamps yourself. And obviously it saves a hell of a lot of time in terms of actually doing the whole task of printing, posting, enveloping, etc., etc. So I'd definitely recommend investing in one of those. What I always do when I do a campaign through this is I'll always have my own name and address in the data, so I can basically just check that it's definitely been sent. And usually when it arrives with me, I know it then probably arrived with others. So that's how I get the letters out. Just to give you an example of then how I use the leads. So Every time I get a lead, I basically type the details in an email. So let me show you my email. There we go. So basically, I have an email address for my Trello board. So basically, I can type whatever I want in here. So I've just had a call back from XYZ Company Limited. You know, the name of the owner, and I could put any other notes that I want to put in on there. When I press, so let me just put in there, test XYZ and send. That will now go into my Trello board. And let me just show you Trello. Okay, so Trello. So I've got various different boards, but this is just an example. This is actually quite an old pipeline because I'm not going to share my absolutely up-to-date pipeline, but just to give you a quick idea. So new pipeline. So basically you can share it, you can create different columns in Trello. So you can see here opportunities. So whenever I send an email, it gives you the opportunity. So you can see there, test XYZ, that email I just sent is there. And then whatever information I've put into that, you've got all that information in there. You can add to it, you can label it, you can attach stuff to it, so you could include accounts, whatever else. If you put the attachment on the email, then that also goes into the Trello board. So you can see these are my current opportunities I haven't filed yet. And then I've got various different columns. So introducers, partners, that's training companies, engineering, recruitment, etc., etc. So they're all in different columns. And basically once a week, I'll log in and I'll look through them all and I'll decide who, if any, I'm going to call. Because sometimes you'll speak to an opportunity, it won't go anywhere, but then you'll revisit in 3 or 6 months' time. I'm not a very big advanced user of Trello, but it's something that I can share with my outsourcers and other people in my team, and we can all sort of collaborate over it. I know that there are other Harvard Club members that use a fairly use Trello more extensively, and probably that's one of those things in return for me sharing this video, maybe somebody else can post a video of how to use Trello in more detail to manage leads, but you get the gist of how I can manage leads. You can also use various CRM programs. I think Zoho is free, I've used that before, and I think you can also use spreadsheets and stuff like that, which is where I sort of started. So yeah, hopefully that just gives you a quick overview of how I do sourcing. Typically I'm getting anywhere between 10 and 12% return on the letters using that. I'm probably doing more letters now on LBO, which is why I focus more on the Endo side of searching. Like I said, if you're looking for distressed businesses and you're sector agnostic, then there's of course no reason why you can't use Endo like I do. But if you want specific sectors in specific areas, go and look them up on a directory, then credit check them and decide whether or not you're going to send out a letter. So that's a very quick overview of how I manage leads and sourcing and stuff like that. I hope you found it useful. Feel free to share this, and if there's anything I can do to help you further, then give us a shout.